Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
That wasn't great, actually. Good evening.
Good evening.
There's just a whole sea of blackness. I can't really even see you. Can we have the house lights up just slightly?
Come on.
Thank you. Okay. Right, I'd like to talk to you about two things that I'm passionate about. But first of all, I like to get to know the audience that I'm talking to a little bit better, which is why it helps that I can just about see you. Can I just ask you quickly to vote on some questions for me? What I'd like you to tell me is about things you love. Okay? So I'm going to ask you, first of all, to raise your hands for me if you really love music. Just about see. Yeah, I think that's almost everyone in the audience. Thank you very much. Now, put your hands up for me now if you consider yourself to be a musician, if you play or sing a musical instrument. Okay, quite a few less, about 25% of the audience. Okay, so it's quite clear that to have a love of music and to enjoy music, you do not need to be a musician. So let me ask you another question. Who here loves science? Yeah, this is a very special audience, isn't it? Okay, put your hands down. Probably about 70% of the audience, not your usual cross-section of the public, I can tell you. And just finally, how many people would consider themselves to be qualified scientists? Okay, similar, all right. Generally, obviously, you don't get so many people publicly admitting a love of science, so it's nice to be amongst friends, thank you. But I think that there's a very important point there. You do not need to be an expert in something to get a great amount of enjoyment out of it. And I want to show you tonight 3 things where I think science and technology have made music take huge leaps forward. And they're 3 things that I just think are brilliant examples of how science and music can work together. My undergraduate degree was in physics and music, and I seemed like I spent 3 years of my life trying to explain to people why I chose to do a degree in physics and music. But to me, it makes perfect sense. And I hope I'm going to persuade you of that as we go through the talk. So first of all, my first machine I want to think about is the machine that enables us to record and capture music. Before we could do this, music was only available to the elite, people who could afford to hire in professional musicians, or people who are rich enough to be trained in music. Not many people at all. So recording of sound and music is what's really brought music to the masses. Now, sound, as you probably know, is a change in pressure. This is a demonstration of a tube of gas with flames across the top. There are holes along the top of the tube. As you place sound into the tube, the pressure changes and you get to visualize the sound wave. Likewise, if we just switch this little machine on, this is a digital oscilloscope, might take you back to your years in the classroom. And this basically changes a sound pressure wave into an electrical wave so that we can visualize it on the screen. So it just helps to be able to picture what the sound wave looks like. So how do you go about turning this wave into something that can be recreated again and again? This is an electron microscope picture of a stylus in a record groove. Now, in 1877, Thomas Edison did the first attempt at recording sound. And it was a wax cylinder, but it quite quickly moved on to be a vinyl record. Some of you may remember this. Some of you may be too young. But this was really the next big thing in sound recording. Now, an analog recording, just to explain quickly to you, basically you take the pressure wave and you turn it into a physical shape or a physical thing of some kind. So that groove is basically the exact same shape as the sound wave of the music you're recording. It's as simple as that. You take the sound wave and you grave it out of some material. So there you can see the grooves. They would be exactly the same shape as the music that you're listening to. Now that's fine, except for the problem you can see there, that the stylus can get very easily bunged up. And of course, if you get a scratch across your record, these grooves get distorted and the sound just doesn't sound as good. The other problem is, record players are really big and bulky, until now. Has anyone seen one of these lovely little things? This is called a vinyl killer. That gives you a clue as to what it does to your vinyl. If you're a vinyl lover, don't use one of these. But this little VW camper van has a battery and a speaker. You switch it on and it drives around the record and plays the music. So let me just demonstrate to that. Here we go, quickly. Okay. Either the batteries are going or the table's on a slant, I'm not sure. Anyway, so analog has its problems. So of course we moved on to digital. This is how digital music works. You take your sound wave at the bottom, you measure it, which is called sampling. For a CD, you measure it 44,000 times a second, so it's pretty accurate. You turn it into numbers, you turn it into digital code, a laser beam goes along the code and turns it back into numbers. It's pretty much simple as that. However, the problem is, you've got this wave going in and a square wave coming out. So even with some electronic smoothing and filtering, the sound you hear out is not exactly the sound you hear in, which is why some analog purists argue that digital music is just not the real thing. I'm quite happy to put up with it, personally. Okay, because, of course, if you go one step further to MP3 files, you can use digital music and get rid of loads of stuff. So in an MP3 file, if you imagine you've got a music piece going along, lots of sound waves at lots of frequencies, what it does is it uses the limitations of your ears to get rid of material that you won't miss. So if there's a very loud peak in the green sound, whatever that might be, it gets rid of the other frequencies that are happening at the same time, because it knows your ears can't hear them and won't miss them. This is called perceptual coding, and basically it means you can get rid of loads of information that you don't really need. And an MP3 file is 11 times smaller than a CD. So you can imagine you can squash loads more stuff in. Again, purists would argue it's not the real thing, it's not the full picture. I'm happy to sacrifice that for the ability to carry around all my music in my pocket. So I think recording music is one of the massive steps where science and technology have really broadened music out to the masses, whereas before it was only for the elite. The second machine I want to talk to you about is a machine which uses the complexities and the beauty of the human voice, but mixes it with some interesting new technologies and colours. And the machine is called a vocoder, but I'm just going to explain how it sort of works. So what I need you to do, I do like a bit of audience interaction, so I hope you're prepared to join in, is I'd like all of you, first of all, to just make a nice ooh sound for me in a minute, not just yet. And when you do it, once you're happy with your ooh sound, please turn and look at the person next to you and look at their mouth. Okay, look at the shape of their mouth, okay? So after 3, 1, 2, 3, ooh. Beautiful. Okay, feel like I'm doing a Welsh National Opera rehearsal. And the second one, do the same thing, but this time I want you to go ah. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Ah. And e. Oh, beautiful. You're very much in tune as well, which I like. Now, when you are making those sounds, your voice is a very complicated machine, very complicated instrument. Your vocal cords create the pitch, so you were all in the same, pretty much the same note, same pitch. But your mouth and your throat and your lips and your tongue change amazingly to create these things called formants. They modulate the sound and they create an envelope for the sound, which we call a formant. And that can mean that you use the same pitch, R, E, R, but your mouth is making different shapes. Okay? Now, an electronic technician was trying to use this for the advantage of pushing more stuff down telephone wires, really, for less bandwidth. Okay? So if you imagine on this picture, when you make that E sound, for example, your voice would look something like this. You've got a pitch part, but you've also got a shape of the wave. If you could just send that shape on its own, without all the rest of the stuff, down a wire, not only has it got a lower frequency, but there's less information to send, so you can get more down there, okay? So he was trying to do that, and then he thought the other end, you just get this shape, and you add in this colour, or this carrier signal, and you can recreate the voice, without having to send all the voice information, okay? So, originally, musically, this was first done using physical techniques, and I found this bit of film, which I just think is brilliant. This is in the 1940s, and this is how they first did this effect with a thing called a sonovox, where they actually played the output from a musical instrument into 2 little discs, which you put by your larynx, and then, when the instruments played, you just formed words with your mouth, and you got to speak like an instrument. All right? So let me just play you a short clip. I think it's brilliant, if it'll just play. Yeah.
present a new miracle of electricity, the sonobox. Harry Babbitt, using special sonobox units, used diction to the tones of the instruments as they play. Harry forms the words, but the instruments sing them. Sing it, Saxon.
I know you anywhere, I know that grin. I know you anywhere when you walk in. I would mingle with a mix of glance in your eyes, watching the starlight dance in your eyes.
Okay, I love that. How excited must they have been to have that new creation? I love it. Okay, if you're of a certain age, most of you are too young, but my parents had this record, and if I play this next clip, just very quickly, it might just transform you back.
Spark, oh spark.
And it went on like that. So using the same technique, they did all sorts of things, and of course Walt Disney loved this. He jumped on the bandwagon, got lots of this sort of effect going on. So that was the physical way of doing it, using the human voice live. But if you use a synthesizer, you can do everything electronic. Now, one of the great things about this machine is it was invented by a guy called Homer Dudley. How great is that name? But Homer Dudley is the guy who invented it. Now, if you think of it visually, I'm a very visual learner kind of person, and if you think of it as the blue thing being the carrier signal and the modulator shapes the wave, I can show you it broken down into parts. So let's imagine our carrier sound, or the colour of the sound, is this. Okay, our modulation, or our voice, is this.
Mr. Magoo! You may be blind, but I can still see you!
When you put them together, you get the colour of the synth and the shape of the voice. And it sounds like this. Oops, not like that. How funky is that? I just think that's brilliant. Okay, so you can use the human voice, but actually add something extra to it. It was also used famously in a Clockwork Orange soundtrack by this wonderful performer called Wendy Carlos. Very happy to share my name with her. Quite happy I don't share the same house as that. But my favourite use of it recently is this little bit from the Scissor Sisters track. Okay, enough of that. Okay, all day. So again, another example, humans were the inspiration, but technology took it that step further, which I think has lent some brilliant sounds to the whole music industry. So finally, I want to show you a machine that I really love called the theremin. Now, any of you were in the earlier session? How many people were in the earlier session? Just stick your hands up for me. Okay, great. So I understand there was a rather impressive performance of a theremin-like instrument. So it's made me review a little bit about what I'm going to do for you here. But the theremin was invented in the late 1920s by a Russian called Leon Theremin. Basically, I've got one here. Very simply, this is how it works. You have two aerials. This one you can see. You have a flat aerial here. Both of these aerials are emitting very high-frequency sounds above what your ears can hear. When you move your hands nearer to the aerial and further away, you actually adjust the voltage coming out of the circuit, and that voltage changes either the pitch of the sound from this aerial or the volume of the sound from this aerial. Now, when these were first invented, there was a huge excitement about the fact that these machines were going to make music available to everyone, because suddenly you don't have to learn lots of music and fingering. Like, you don't need any kind of shapes for your guitar chords, because you don't touch the instrument when you're playing it. You just move your hands in the air. How hard can it be? I think they were completely wrong, because I reckon it's one of the hardest instruments to play. I will have a very, very short attempt at playing something based on the area we're in, but do forgive me for being a very basic beginner. I'll just have to tune up. Okay, here we go. Thank you very much. Okay. Yes, so they are not at all easy to play. They're very, very hard to play, although they do have a beautiful sort of ethereal element to them. And when they're played properly, they can create beautiful music. So just a very quick clip of someone actually playing it properly. Okay, so it can have a very sort of haunting effect to it, but it needs the human to kind of bring that out of the machine. However, I still think it's a wonderful new method of performance that we wouldn't have had without technology. So that was adapted a little bit. This is a version of the theremin called a terpistone or a terpsitone. Google doesn't quite agree on which it is. A whole room full of plates where you moved around to change the sound, which I quite like. And Google threw up this lovely performance of someone with a theremin bra. Yes, enough of that. Of course, you do still need the human, or do you? Because I also found someone has developed a robot which is actually able to play the theremin. So are we getting dangerously close to this point where actually the human is not needed? So here's a theremin playing, a robot playing the theremin. That's not it. Just a little intro. I do like the fact it's playing percussion as well. That's pretty cool. Okay, that's a robot called Lev, and he can play the theremin. And I just wanted to finish, really, that was my three sort of big favourite machines that I think of advanced music. But one last thought. We still need the human, obviously, to do a lot of those things or to generate the sounds for a lot of those things. Are we getting anywhere near to the position where we don't need the human to make the music? Well, my supervisor at university, Dr. Mike Greenoff, had done some work on this, and he did some work programming a computer to try and teach it the rules of music so that it could generate music spontaneously. Now, I can remember having a really eureka moment in school. But it wasn't in science, it was in music. And it was the day that we learned how to structure music using chord progressions and harmonies that actually had predictable effects. So knowing that certain notes would give different emotional effects. And it was like a light bulb went on in my head. I thought, this is amazing. All you've got to do is follow these rules, and you can create something that people will enjoy listening to. I couldn't believe it was like someone had let the secret out about what music was about. Okay, it might have been more of a sort of Stock Aitken and Waterman moment than a eureka moment, because granted, the kind of music you can generate like that is not great. But it is music, nevertheless. And I just want to play you to finish a little bit of computer bark, okay? This was purely created by a computer just following the rules that it had been told. And it's been tested against lots of bark aficionados, and they're very, very hard pushed to tell the difference. So I'll just play you a very quick burst and then sum up. Once is enough, thank you. So I think that's pretty convincing. Of course, you could argue, but you still need the human to tell the computer the rules to generate that piece of music. So we're not quite there yet. But I do think that it's very important for us to see that all these science and technology advances are actually widening the scope of music and making music much more open to every kind of person. Thank you very much.